Okay, welcome to the video for Objective 3D and also 3E. We're going to talk about graphing here, and we're going to start with, I can graph a linear equation by plotting the y-intercept and slope. So this should be a review, but it is worth reviewing because we definitely want to make sure we're good at plotting linear equations in this form. And this form is slope-intercept form. And it's called slope-intercept form because right here is the slope, and right here is the y-intercept. And we can use these two pieces of information to plot. So you also see this written as y equals mx plus b. And in every equation, we're going to leave the x and y. We have to have an x and y because that's what makes it some sort of graph and line on our coordinate plane. But the m is the slope, and the b is the y-intercept. All right, so let's go ahead and plot this line here. So we're going to start off by plotting the y-intercept. So the step one is just to make a dot at the y-intercept. Okay, so it's at +5, it's on the y-axis, and what y-intercept means is it's where the line goes across the y-axis, so where it intercepts the y-axis. So that's going to be right here. And then the second step is just to count off the slope. And we count the slope by doing the rise over run, so the up and down over the left or right. Okay, so move from the last point, so this point here, according to the slope. Up, down, over, left, right. And so what this means is the top number is going to tell you where to go up or down and how much, and the bottom number is left or right and how much. And very important here, guys, you're only going to use this negative once. You can use it on the top number or on the bottom number. It doesn't matter, but don't use it twice. So only use the negative on the top or the bottom. Okay, so let's count the slope from this point. So we're going to use the negative once. I'm going to use it on the top, and then I'll show you how it doesn't make a difference whether you use it on the top or the bottom. But I'm going to change this -1/2 with the negative in the front to look like this, -1/2. And this is going to tell me whether I go up or down. And since it's negative, I'm going to go down. And then on the bottom here, this is going to tell me whether I go left or right. Well, since it is positive, I'm going to go right. And then the number tells me how far I'm going to go, right or down. So down -1, I'm going to go right there. And then right 2. So 1, 2. And it's always nice to draw a few points. You can get a straighter line that way so your line's not all curvy. So we're going to go down 1 over 2. Down 1 over 2. And your lines, make them as straight as possible, and lines go on forever because these points, you can put an infinite amount of numbers in for x and y. They go on forever. That means that you should be drawing lines that take up most of your graph with arrows on either end. Okay, so that's what your line looks like for this equation right there. So this is what the graph looks like. Okay, so I did want to show you that it doesn't make a difference where you put the negative, but you can only use it once. So if I take this, and instead of having the negative on the top, I'm going to put it on the bottom. So now I have a -2. Now this means I'm going to go up 1, and I'm going to go left -2, and I'm still going to start from that same intercept point, which was at 5, right there. And I'm going to go up 1, and then left 2. And you can see it's falling on the line as it should, up 1, left 2. So it does not matter. What will matter, what will be a mistake, and so just follow along, but this is definitely not correct, is if I use the negative twice. If I go -1 over -2, that means I'm going down and I am going left. So you have to make sure you only use the negative once, because if I go down 1 and left 2, I end up over here, and I definitely have a different line in this case. It would go like that. So that is incorrect. So let me erase this so we don't include it in our notes and think that that's a possibility. Okay, so those are all the steps for how to do this. Let's try a couple more equations here to graph. Okay, here's another equation, and it is in slope-intercept form for us. So this is the slope, and we'll call it m. The slope is always m. And this is the y-intercept, and it's b. So this is the slope, and this is the y-intercept for this one. And we're going to follow the same steps here. I need to plot this first. So I'm going to go to the y-axis. I'm going to put a dot at -3. And now I'm going to look at my slope and see what the up and down are. So I'm going to bring it over here. My slope is 4. Okay, well, right now I only have an up-down. I don't have a left-right. So how can I make this into a fraction but keep it the same number? So I want to make sure that it's still the number 4. It just looks different. So to make it look different so that it's a fraction, I'm going to put it over 1. I haven't actually changed the value of the number. I've just made it look different. So now I have 4 positive, that's going to be up, and 1 positive means I'm going to go to the right. So starting from this point, and remember, it's not from the origin. This is the origin. You start from the y-intercept that you just plotted. And I think that's a common mistake I see a lot, is people plot this point and then start from the origin and then connect them. But you actually do have to find the slope from this point. So up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over to the right. Up 1, 2, 3, 4, over to the right. And then if I just wanted to finish it this way, I'm just going to do the opposite. Down 1, 2, 3, 4, and over to the left. If any of your points don't fall on a line, then you know you must have counted something wrong. So let me draw in my line here. Remember, it should be nice and long with arrows at both ends. There we go. And something else I want to point out is we have a positive slope here. When you have a positive slope, you're going to go uphill from left to right. When you have a negative slope, you're going to go downhill from left to right. So since this number in front of the x is positive, when you look at your graph just to double check that you did it correctly, notice whether it's going uphill or downhill. So we did do it correctly because it's going uphill. Okay, let's do another problem. Okay, so this one looks a little bit different, and why it looks different is it's not in slope-intercept form, and that's important to notice because you can't just go ahead and plot it just the way it looks right now. You're actually going to have to solve for y first and put it in slope-intercept form. So solve for y. So what that means is we're going to go ahead and get everything away from the y by backtracking and moving it to the other side. So I'm going to minus 4, they cancel out here, and I'm left with 2y equals, and remember these cannot be combined. Okay, these can't be combined because one's an x, one's a -4, they're not like terms. And so that you get it in slope-intercept form, and remember we're trying to get it to look like this, y equals mx plus b. Okay, because we're trying to get that into this form, let's put the x first here, and then we'll do -4. Then things will go a little bit easier for us. Okay, so my next step then, since I have the y almost by itself, it's just being multiplied by the 2. To get rid of the 2, I'm going to have to do the opposite, which is divide by 2. And then I have y equals, well, what is this? Is this just x over 2? That's certainly one way to write it. But since we know that we're going to want a fraction in front of here, let's actually make a fraction. So I have 1 in front of the x. Whenever you don't see something in front of the variable, there is a 1 there. So I can just make this 1 over 2. And then put the x next to it, and then we'll clearly see what our slope is. But don't forget this 2 has to go into both of these, so now this -4 divided by 2 becomes a -2. Okay, we're going to come over to our graph here, and let me get rid of this, or to our coordinate plane, and draw our graphs. Let me get rid of our last one here. We now have all the information we need to plot this. We have our slope right here, so 1 over 2. 1 positive is going to go up. 2 positive is going to go right. But we start with our y-intercept here. So I'm going to go ahead and find -2 on my y-axis. And now I'm going to go up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2. And once again, I'm just going to double check. My slope is positive. Am I getting a positive slope on my graph? I am. It is going uphill from left to right. to finish off my line in the other direction, I'm going to do the opposite here. So down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2, and then I can go ahead and draw in my line. There we go. That is graphing a linear equation by plotting the y-intercept and the slope. Okay, now let's take a look at objective 3E. I can graph an equation by plotting points. And so we're going to look at some equations that are not linear, so they don't make a line. The graph is going to look different. So for now, how we're going to plot this is we're just going to pick some points to figure out what this looks like. And we know that the x and y that are on this graph have to be a solution to this. So I'm actually going to move this over to the side so I can write underneath it. There we go. All right, so I'm going to make a table of x's and y's that are solutions to this. And you're just going to start picking some x's. It's up to you. However, I'm going to tell you a hint. Don't forget to include some negatives and make sure you use enough points. Okay, so I'm going to put in some x's here, and then I'm going to find out what the y is. So I want to make sure I don't forget some negatives. So I'm going to start with -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. So we're moving across the y-axis on the x-axis and just picking a variety of points and see what happens. Once we plot a few of them, if we can see the basic shape of our graph, we can go with it. But if we can't, we might need a few more points. So how do I try these out? How do I find out the y? Well, I'm actually going to have to evaluate the equation with the x. So I'm going to plug in -2. So I'm going to make a home. So where the x is, I'm going to put in parentheses to make a home for what I'm plugging in. And then I'm just going to copy the rest of the equation. Okay, so now I put in -2. -2 times -2, so it's going to become positive. So I have +4 minus 3 equals y. So y equals 1. And I'm just going to go through and do this for each of the x's that I chose. So now I have -1 squared minus 3 equals y. -1 squared is 1 minus 3 equals y. I get -2. And I'm going to start completing my table over here. I'll erase mine, but you just continue with your notes there. Make a home. This time I'm going to plug in this 0. 0 squared is just 0, so I have -3. And then 1 squared minus 3 equals y. 1 squared is 1 minus 3. I end up with -2. And then my last point here that I have rewrite it, plug in my 2. I get 2 squared is 4 minus 3 equals y, and I get 1. So now I can go ahead and plot these points and see what this graph looks like. So my first point, -2, 1, -2, 1 is going to be right here. -1, -2, -1, -2 is right here. 0, -3. 1, -2, and 2, 1. So you can see this is not a straight line. This one looks a little bit different, kind of looks like a happy face. So you're probably wondering, well, is it just pointy like this? And there is some little bit of intuition and guessing that's going to go into this for now until we get more into what all these graphs look like. But this actually is going to have more of a curve like this. That's not very well drawn. I'm going to try that again. A little bit hard for me to draw with this tablet, but there we go. It should look like a happy face. It shouldn't be so bumpy. So do your best to try to draw kind of a happy face to it. All right, so let's look at another one, and we're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to try out a few points, and I'm going to try to stay with the same points that I had before as far as the x's, because I have some negatives and some positives, and I have 0, so I'm going to know where it crosses over the y-axis. But I'm going to try a different equation. This equation here. Okay, the first thing we need to make sure we know about this problem is what these lines mean over here, what these straight lines around the x minus 1 mean. So these straight lines are just absolute value, and it means distance from 0. So for instance, if we have this, it's asking how far on the number line is 3 from 0. So here's 0, here's 3. Not very evenly spaced there. There's 3. Okay, so how far is 3 from 0? It's 1, 2, 3 spots. So x equals 3. However, if we have how far is negative 3 from 0? Well, here's negative 3. There's 1, 2, 3. How far is negative 3 from 0? It is 1, 2, 3. It is also 3 spots. So basically what it does is it gets rid of the negative sign and makes whatever number that's in the absolute value just become positive. So just a quick refresher on that before we try this problem over here. Let's get rid of this graph. Okay, so we have our table set up, and we're just going to try these different numbers to see what we come up with. So I have y equals the absolute value, and then put a home where the x is, someplace to put your x value, and I'm going to put in negative 2. And then I'm just going to solve within the absolute values. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3, and then the absolute value of negative 3, how far is negative 3 from 0? It's 3 from 0. So negative 2 is going to go in positive 3 for the y value. And we're just going to go through and try each of our numbers, and feel free to pause the video and try to work it out on your own. Y equals negative 1 minus 1. And this is not a 1, this is the absolute value sign, so don't get those confused in there. So negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2. And the absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2. So this y just carries down, and y equals 2. Keep going through, finding each of the numbers. Okay, so I went ahead and found these numbers on my own, and now I'm going to plug them in, or I'm sorry, plot them. So negative 2, 3 is right here. Negative 1, 2 is here. 0, 1. 1, 0, so over 1, up nothing, as opposed to this one, which was over not at all and up 1. Sometimes people get those confused. And then 2, 1. 1, 2, up 1. All right, we're starting to see the shape of our graph. In this case, we might want to plot maybe 1 or 2 points, find out what 1 or 2 points are so we can really see what's going to happen over here. So let's continue this direction. I have 1, 2. Let's try the number 3. Let's find out what 3 minus 1, and then you take the absolute value is. 3 minus 1 is 2, and then the absolute value of 2 is 2. So now 3, 2. So I'm starting to see a little bit of symmetry here. It goes 3, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, and then starting to go back up again. So just to be sure, sometimes you want to plot more than just 5 points and kind of see where this is heading. But it does make a point like that. Okay, so that's it for objective 3E and 3D. I will see you in class.